Hi students, and welcome to today's live IELTS class. My name is Adrian and I'm streaming to you from beautiful Victoria here in Western Canada. I hope that all of you have had a superb week, and I hope that you're all looking forward to a fantastic weekend ahead with some time to study as well as some time to relax and enjoy life. Welcome Fuang, hi Anton, welcome Andrew, welcome to our members. Everybody, this is a members chat class. Of course, everyone is welcome to watch. We will be looking at an IELTS Task 1 writing, 2 bar graphs about using mobile phones. Welcome Carolina, our chat moderator. Thank you for joining us to help students with their questions and to help keep the conversation on topic. It's good to have you with us. Everybody, this lesson is presented to you by aehelp.com for academic IELTS. You want to join us there. For general IELTS and to learn about general IELTS Task 1, that is writing a narrative piece for an email or a letter to someone, join us at gieltshelp.com. That's generalieltshelp.com. That's where we have our general IELTS information. This is what our academic IELTS website looks like here at aehelp.com. You can simply click this big red button that's just above my head there. It's a one-time payment for lifetime access. We are an IDP affiliate, a British Council partner, an IELTS test registration center, and we help thousands of students every day. So you can become one of our success stories. You can check out what these students have to say about using our learning materials and about their life goals and how they achieved the desired score on the IELTS exam. For the general IELTS, it's gieltshelp.com. Same idea. Click that big red button there to join the premium IELTS package. And again, it's a one-time payment for lifetime access. And in the spirit of writing, when you click that button, you can use the code WRITE9 for a 10% discount. The price is different in different countries, so you'll have to check that out for yourself. Yeah, one time, you're off to the races. That's it. You can use it as long as you need to until you need to pass the IELTS or you learn all the English from the website. There's lots there for you, so lots of learning to be had. You can also access our materials through apps, Academic IELTS Help, General IELTS Help. Those apps will link to the websites, and you can get those apps from your app stores. And you can also send me an email if you have questions. I'm here to help you. My email is adrian@aehelp.com. Or you can also get a hold of me at admin@aehelp.com. Either of those will work. All right, students. So right now we've got Task 1 writing for members, and then we'll have listening, Part 1 and Part 2 for subscribers. So subscribe to the channel, click that notification button, get notified of these live classes, and join the chat in these subscriber chat classes. That's free, and we encourage you to do it. We've got lots of members in here since we started. Good. Sylviana, Fong, Karina, Romelia, Nguyen. Nice to have you all with me. Tomorrow we have those classes, and then on Saturday we'll have speaking part 2 and speaking part 3. We did release a task 2 writing video that you should check out. It's pretty popular. It got about 60-something thousand views in the first 3 days. So we're happy about that. It's got a lot of great information there for you. I just put the link into the chat for everyone. All right, let's jump into this IELTS Task 1 writing. It's an academic, okay? Task 1 writing in the writing section is different in the academic and the general. Again, I said this earlier, but the academic one, you have to basically write an expository essay, okay? Expository essay means it's exposing information, so it's interpreting and showing information to the reader. You do not have to think about your own ideas. Okay, so that's why it's task 1. You should always do task 1 first in the IELTS, because you have all the information that you need to write the essay. So you really just need to write it. You have to focus on choosing good vocabulary, putting together good structure, having some good analysis, but all the information is there. So you don't have to get too creative. Okay, now you do have to think for a Band 9 essay, but you don't have to get too creative. What's most important is that you understand what an expository piece is. You understand that it's written in the third person voice of the author, which means no I, no you. It's all about the objective voice. It's data. You're interpreting data, information. And then, of course, you should always practice the different types of task 1. So task 1 for academic, you could get a picture of a map or a diagram. You could get a line graph, pie chart, bar graph, or a flow chart, or any combination of those. As long as you know what each of those kinds of graphs are used for, then you should be okay. Now, it's important to learn that before you go to university. You will probably save yourself a lot of time and headache to learn the use of graphs before university. Anybody know why that is? So why is it? There's a couple reasons. Just hint. So why do you think it's a good idea to learn about the applications? And I talk about that because a lot of people write task 1 like they're writing for a line graph. It doesn't matter, like they see a bar graph or a pie chart or whatever, and they're just writing about it like a line graph. But that's not correct, okay? Different graphs have different purpose. So why is it important to learn the uses, or the specific use, or application is even a better word here, of different graph types like pie charts, line graphs. British like to say charts, Americans like to say graphs, but we interchange them, so it doesn't really matter. Line graphs, bar charts, flow charts. Flow charts is often hyphenated. Flow charts, diagrams. Okay, so why do you think, and let's say on tables, okay, so why do you think? Okay, Raquia says because it is used for further studies. And Andrew says graphs, diagrams are extremely common in engineering classes. Yeah, that's right, Carolina. So to apply in studies and work, yeah, you're right. So it's very common. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when you're going to meet with these graphs. So keep in mind that these topics are taught in a public school. Grades, I don't want to say 1, but let's say grades 4 to 12. And you will most likely need to know this for any class you take in university, and for many jobs. Okay. Professors really don't want to sit there and try to explain to you the reason why a pie chart is different than a bar graph or a line graph. Okay, they expect you to know that information. All right, so it's taught in schools, it's used in university, it's used in work as well. My major in university was psychology. And boy, did I ever see a lot of graphs and charts during my 5 years of studies. So I came across a lot of different charts and graphs. All right, everybody. So you need to learn these. Again, if you don't know what bar charts, pie charts are used for and how they're different, you should definitely review that. You can learn that in your writing section of your premium course at aehelp.com. Okay, we've dedicated a whole section to that so that people are really clear about it. All right. And of course, that will also save you from trying to write a template. Like a lot of people are like, okay, if I use significantly increasing, then that's great vocabulary. Well, yeah, but that's only for line graphs usually. Okay. In pie charts, the data doesn't significantly increase, generally speaking. There's changes, but there's no continuous information. All right. Okay. With that in mind, everybody, let's get to it. So here we have our question, and of course we're going to have our graph coming up here pretty quick. So let's read it first. You should always just pay extra attention after the reading section. When you get to the writing section, just remember, okay, I need to read this question a little bit more carefully than the reading passages because it's the whole concept, right? So here we go. IELTS Task 1 Writing. You should spend about 20 minutes on this task. Don't spend more. Spend 40 minutes on task 2. Okay, that's very important. Task 1 is kind of the warm-up task. The following graphs show the percentage of phone use and the ownership by education level in a certain period. Report the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Okay, so here we have our first graph. And our first graph here says smartphone ownership 2000 to 2010. Okay. So we've got our percentage here on the y-axis, right? And it goes from 0 all the way to 90 with intervals of 10%, or 10%, I should say. And then here on the x-axis, we've got the years, and we've got 2000, 2002, 4, 6, 8, 10, and it's increasing by 2-year intervals. I'll write down this vocabulary. If you're catching it, that's great. So 2-year intervals means there's an exact 2-year difference in time span between the data points here, right? Okay. All right. So we don't have the name of the country or the city where this data is being drawn from. So simply it's a sample of individuals, or it's a group that has been surveyed. All right. And so I'm thinking about these, right? You probably noticed something interesting. So when I was looking at the data, I was looking at it the same way as I read, right? So I was looking at it from top down, and from left to right. Okay, so just like reading. So it's top down, left to right. Okay, it's very important. You should always be systematic in your analysis of data, and you should always follow the pattern of top down, left to right. Okay, it's very important. Already got that? All right, don't jump around. So don't look at this and be like, "Ooh, look at that big bar in 2010. It's huge." That's great. I'm sure you'll notice it. It's there. It's not going to run away. But start here, okay? Start with the title and then work your way from top down, left to right, all right? Don't get too excited about giant bars, right? Some people get really excited and then that's all they focus on, and they go, "We can see the most people used phones in 2010. It's like, whoa, well, yeah, all right, but how did we get there? Okay, so then the second bar graph. So we've got 2 bar graphs. Sometimes, by the way, students, you'll have different types of graphs combined. So you'll have a bar graph with table, or you'll have pie charts with a line graph or something. So you can have different graphs. So definitely try these combination kind of type graphs, okay? All right, so here, same concept. So we've got smartphone ownership by education level, and here we've got 2 time periods, 2000 and 2010, which is obviously reflective of the starting period of the previous graph and the end period, so the last year of the previous graph. Students, when you have two graphs, you have to make a connection between the two graphs. They will never give you two disconnected graphs that have nothing in common. So these two graphs are definitely strongly connected with each other. They are linked to each other. Okay, so you have to be able to explain that linkage. And usually that linkage, it's logically from top down. So you want to focus on this graph first, okay? And then you want to focus on this graph second, all right? IELTS, they're pretty good about logic. So 99% of the time, the logic is there. I've seen some really rare cases where it's hard to find and it's a little bit inverse, but in most cases you'll see it, okay? So chances are the logic is there, and you'll be good. Mal is asking, how many charts will be on the exam? Well, it's hard to say, Mal. Sometimes you have 4 pie charts. Sometimes you have 2 bar graphs. Sometimes you have just one table. There is no rule about how many you have. It could be any different setup. Never try to predict it. Okay, this is why it's super important that you study all the different types of graphs and charts, because I see these crazy silly videos on YouTube and online where they're like, we're predicting your exam for the next month, and it's like, what are you talking? Like, how is that even possible? You can't predict it, okay? Unless somebody's like stealing the exams or something. There's no way to predict it. You've got a better chance of winning the lottery, okay? All right. So second graph, and so okay, we've got 20 minutes, students. So over here, I'm going into a lot of detail for you, but you really have to do this quickly. So take out the key points that I'm telling you, and you got to do this quickly in the first 3 minutes. Okay. All right, Sarah's here too. Welcome, Sarah. Hi, just noticed you're here. Yeah, Sarah says it can be a graph with other types of charts. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. I've never really seen 3 different ones. Like I've never actually seen like a pie chart with a line graph with a bar graph. Okay, so they're not going to go that hardcore on you. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that. Keep it in mind, students, this isn't a university project. So the information is not going to be so complicated, and it's not going to be anything near as complicated as what you will actually see in some of your university classes, like Andrew said, in engineering. So just keep your thoughts simple, okay? All right, and you usually don't see colors in the IELTS exam, you just see patterns. So instead of the red and the blue, you might have one solid fill for the bar graphs, and then you might have one like dotted fill or line fill, okay? All right, so here we've got smartphone ownership by education level, and then we've got the level of education, okay? And then we've got no school certificate, high school graduate, bachelor's degree, master's degree, doctorate degree. Okay, so we've got some different levels of education there, from no high school to undergraduate, and then 2 levels of graduate degrees. Great. Okay, good. And on the y-axis, again, we see percents 0 to 100. Okay, good. So let's start making sense of this. All right. The first step for the essay is your introduction. Okay. Now, your introduction, simply put, is a paraphrase of the question with more detail. Using the graph or the graphs. Okay, so here we've got the question again. The following graphs show the percentage of phone use and the ownership by education level in a certain period. All right, so let's take that information. Let's take the information from these graphs. So 2000 to 2010, it's 0 to 90, and the years are 2000 to 2010, intervals of 2 years. And then here we've got smartphone ownership by education level. We've got 5 levels of education: no high school certificate, high school graduate, bachelor's degree, master's degree, doctorate degree. Okay. All right. And we don't just simply have 2 graphs, but we have 2 bar graphs. So work with me here, students. Let's do this together. Okay. Sarah says, I've been here since the beginning. I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't see you there at the very beginning. All right, but I see you now. I see your first comment there. Hello, Caroline and Adrian. All right. Okay. Lovely to have all of you here. So I want to see some solid writing, everyone. Practice your writing. Put it into the chat. I will take a look at it. You've got a head start. So go for it. You should almost be able to do it just from your brain. Like, you know, these are fairly simple graphs. So just focus on the English. And I'm going to do the same. So I'm going to start typing the introduction, and then we'll compare it. All right, there we go. There's my introductory paragraph. It's all one sentence, one big long sentence. If you are not sure about how to write a complete sentence that's not run-on, that's not confusing, break it up. Do it in 2 sentences. It's absolutely okay. There is no rule that it has to be one big sentence. It can be 2 sentences, okay? So don't be afraid to break your information into 2 sentences. If it's easier, you can still get a high band score. Okay. All right. So these 2 bar graphs depict data about phone usage. Notice I'm using it here as a noun. Usage. The first shows the percentage of individuals who owned phones from 2000 to 2010 with intervals of 2 years. So here, I'm just simply letting the reader know that I'm very clear about what I'm looking at. So here, and notice that it says smartphone. So as soon as I notice a detail like smartphone, I'll upgrade my writing and say smartphone, okay? And so I indicate here the 2000 to 2010 with the interval of 2 years. So I'm telling the reader right away, I recognize, okay, the time period, and I'm also recognizing the data sets here as well, okay? So, and then I continue, and the second depicts the percent of people who possessed phones based on their education. So instead of writing owned, I wrote possessed here, or bought might even work here, okay? And I can upgrade the first one here to smartphones. Now I don't need to keep writing smartphones, so be smart, ha ha ha. Be smart. You don't have to write every word as long as what's in the graph. So once you've said smartphone, then we know that the next time you write phone, you're talking about smartphones, okay? So it's fine, or cell phone even, okay? All right, let's see what you have here. Rakwea writes, the given two bar graphs, we know they're given, so you don't need to say given, Rakwea. You just need to say these, okay? So students, avoid writing awkward information, which includes information about saying like the given or the provided. We know it's provided. It's there. You're looking at it. Also, don't refer to the location of graphs. So don't say the given bar graphs below. When they're looking at your answer sheet, they're not actually looking at the graph. It's not going to be below for the examiner. It's going to be maybe completely on another table, okay? So so don't refer to the location of a piece of paper or a drawing, okay? All right, so Rakwea, these two bar graphs depict the data about, we don't need the here, depict data about phone use, who owns phones. That's incorrect grammar there. About phone use that's enough there. From 2000 to 2010 with 2-year intervals. 2-year, when you're doing it like this, because it's an adjective, it's like a 2-year chunk, you need to hyphenate that, Rakwea. So 2-year intervals, and in y-axis and the y-axis. It's a unique y-axis. Axis is always hyphenated, and it's an S after the I. And the y-axis 10% intervals shows 10% intervals from 0 to 100. You don't need a space after the number before the percent sign, okay? And you don't need to report the y-axis here because it's a very standard y-axis. If the y-axis is a little bit strange or unique in some way, then it's a good idea to report it. But just reporting that it's 10% intervals, it's such a common type of scale that we really don't need to report it. I think it's fine just to leave it. And it's also incorrect to say from 0 to 100, because if we pay careful attention here, Rakwea, we can see that the first one actually stops at 90%. So 100% of people never owned phones, right? Now, in IELTS, they're not going to take a lot of marks for those kinds of mistakes unless you have many of them. But in university, yeah, your professor will identify that. They'll say, Rakwea, that's 90%. It's not 100%. Don't confuse your audience, right? So you have to be really careful with information in the academic, all right? Okay. Those are some very common mistakes for people, Rakwea. So I highly recommend everybody pay attention to those. Okay, Andrew, let's see what you have. Andrew writes, let's get some of these little badges out of the way there, Andrew. So Andrew writes, the first bar chart illustrates the ratio of people using phones between 2000 and 2010 with 2-year intervals, comma, whereas the second one compares. Yeah, I mean, okay, Andrew, I got you. It's okay writing. Instead of using the pronoun one, I would use a little bit more of a subjective noun here. So I would say graph, okay? It's more natural, especially at the start of an essay, right? So again, the first bar chart illustrates the ratio of people using phones between 2000 and 2010 with 2-year intervals, whereas the second graph compares the proportion among 5 different levels of education in the same decade. Very nice. I like this use of language. They're in the same decade. So you're already making comparisons where relevant. Remember, the original question in task 1 always says, make comparisons where relevant. And it's nice to do that right at the beginning. So Andrew, you did a good job here telling the reader that, hey, look, I've identified that we're looking at the same decade here, and I'm going to tell you this right away. So that was really good there. Okay. All right. Rakwea, if I wanted to score it before I corrected this would have been about a band 5. Andrew, this would be about a band 8 here. If you really wanted to make it a band 9, what you should do is a little bit more detail. So you should add a little bit about that nominal data, okay? So this type of data here, the no high school certificate, high school graduate, this type of data is called nominal data, which is a fancy way of saying name data. The correct way is nominal data. So just naming some of that nominal data is a good idea. So proportion among 5 different levels of education. If you don't want to write all of them because you're like, well, I don't want to, be that wordy, I'm going to write about it anyway in the analysis, you can say ranging from not finishing high school or no high school diploma all the way to PhD. Okay. And then in the same decade. And then you've got a band 9. Then you've got that really nice level of depth that they're looking for that expert level of communication. Okay. All right. Nguyen Viet says, these graphs show the percentage of phone usage with respect to the time period of every 2 years. A little bit wordy there, Nguyen. So with respect to is not needed. Phone usage every 2 years from 2000 to 2010, and also the education level between 2000 and 2010. Not bad, Nguyen, a little bit wordy there, so clean that up and make sure you have clarity. Make sure you tell your reader that one graph shows one piece of data, the other one shows the other piece of data. That's not clear from what you're writing, okay? Rajveer, very nice, concise start. Rajveer writes, the graph data depicts the bar graphs depict phone usage data. That's very nice, concise writing. Where the first displays the percentage of people who possess smartphones from 2000 to 2010 with 2-year intervals. And the second graph shows the percentage of individuals who had mobile phones based on their education levels. Very nice. Okay, so I'm seeing some good writing there, students. That's great. Keep writing. I will look at different students' pieces at different times so that all of you get some direct feedback. All right, we're going to keep moving forward. So now my next step, what is it? What's my next paragraph, everybody? So I've got the introduction, which is fine. I've reviewed it. You should review your paragraphs after you write each one. Okay, so after I finish the introduction, I review it. And my next one is, Rakwea says, analysis. And Andrew is correct. Andrew says, no, it's the overview. Fuang agrees. Okay, so it's the overview. Overview basically means the most observable information which gives the outline for the analysis, kind of like the thesis in task 2. Okay, so it's the most observable information. All right, so we look at it, and that means without looking at too much detail. So I'm not really interested at this point about the specific percentages. And, the least and the most, yeah, okay, that's kind of interesting, but it's not the most interesting. And again, you don't want your essay to sound like every other guy and every other girl who sat the IELTS exam, right? So writing the most and the least is probably very popular. So rather than that, we want to kind of look at the trend, right? So here we've got the least in 2000, and then every consecutive 2 decades, we've got an increase in data usage, right? Now, again, we don't need to get into details. So for me, at this point, what's most interesting is that smartphone ownership from 2000 to 2010 had a very consistent increase with every 2-year interval, okay? Nearly double by the end of the decade. Actually more than double. So here it's 40% and here it's over 80%. So it more than doubled within the decade, right? So that's what's most interesting for me with the first graph, and I'm going to write about the first graph first, so I might as well just do this part of the overview first and then move down below to the second part of the interview after, okay? All right, so let's write about that. So let's write about this trend in the decade, and then let's write about this very significant observable increase in the trend without going into too much detail. Okay. Yeah, so Rejveer's already starting. Rejveer says, at first glance, in the first graph, there's a consistent growth every 2 years. Now, instead of referring to the graph, Rejveer, actually refer to the specific data. It's always more interesting. So remember, students, you're interpreting. Okay, you're interpreting. You're not just reporting what you see. Essays that report what you see get 6.5, maybe 7 if they are perfectly written. Essays that interpret data, okay, that's the data, or that's the type of essay that gets the band 8, band 9s. It's a very important difference. I'm going to write this down before I do my overview, just to make sure that everybody's clear. Is everybody clear on what the difference is between simply reporting versus interpreting? Okay, so it is very important to understand the difference between interpreting data, or sorry, I should say reporting data, versus interpreting data versus assuming data. Okay, so interpreting or reporting data, everybody says, of course. Rejveer says, okay. Andrew, it's not that obvious. I see these mistakes all the time with students. So I'm guessing, Andrew, that you're in engineering. So for you, people have taught you this, like they said, okay. Reporting data is something like this. I'll give you an example, okay? So reporting data is something like in 2000, 40% of people had smartphones, but by 2010, over 80% of individuals had a phone. Okay, so I'm going to keep it fairly simple. So this would be reporting data. Okay, now interpreting data would be like this. Okay, interpreting data would be like the percent of smartphone ownership more than doubled in the decade from 2000 to 2010, from 40 to over 80%. Okay, so this would be interpreting data, because I'm telling the reader that I'm noticing that it's a doubling or more than doubling of ownership, right? So this would be like your band 6, okay? And then this would be like your band 9. level writing. Okay. So most of your writing for task 1 should be an interpretation of data. Now, assuming data is bad. It's a big no-no. Okay. So assuming data would be something like this. The ownership of phones grew from 40% to 80% from 2000 to 2010, likely because smartphones got cheaper. Okay. So this would be assuming data, and this is in university it's a fail. In work it can be you're getting a warning for misinforming employees or people, and in IELTS you're dropping band scores, so band 5 or less. Okay, because we have no idea why more people own phones. It could be that maybe the need for mobile phones grew. So if somebody didn't have a mobile phone, it was hard for them to function in society. So even though it maybe got more expensive, people had to get smartphones because it was the only way to communicate in society. Nguyen saying, what phrase can I use if it's less than double? Nguyen, there are lots of different phrases. You can use quarter, half, a third, a fifth. Okay, so if it's 20%, if it's a third, then it's 30%, right? So percentages can be explained as ratios, and the most common ones are quarter, a third, a half, a fifth, a sixth. Okay, so those are very common. All right. Okay, so I digressed a little bit there with the reporting data versus interpreting data versus assuming data, but it's very, very important. Okay, everybody's clear on this reporting, interpreting, assuming. Okay, because I still see a lot of people that are assuming data, which is a big no-no, and I still see a lot of people that are just reporting data. Less people are actually interpreting data. When you look at the questions and you see this part here, the report the main features and make comparisons were relevant. This make comparisons were relevant basically means interpret the data. Okay, so make comparisons were relevant is telling you interpret the data. Means interpret the data. Okay. All right. I see lots of thumbs up, so that's good. And that's what we're going to do, right? So let's take a look at the this graph here, smartphone ownership. Let's do the overview. So immediately, I'm going to write it, you write it, and then we'll compare. So immediately, in the first graph, it is clear that smartphone use consistently increased with every 2-year interval and more than doubled in the given decade. Okay? Now, I'm not going to say 40 to 80%, okay? So I can describe that data more in my analysis, okay? Furthermore, okay, so here when we look at the second graph, we can also see that there is noticeable, I wouldn't say significant, so this is where you have to be careful with your vocabulary, because you can see here that the jumps here are quite significant, but then as soon as we get to the university level of education, it seems to be a little bit smaller, right? So less than university education, the changes are more significant, and following university, there is noticeable but less significant. So I'm just going to say noticeable, okay? And we notice something else too, of course, right? So here we have the red and the blue. So I noticed that the blue, which is 2010, is less than the red. Okay. So, all right. I think actually in this graph there might be a bit of an issue here. Let me fix that real quick. So let's switch these around, because I believe blue, so this is a mistake in the graph, everyone, just to FYI. The blue should be 2000 and the red should be 2010. Why do I know that? So why do I know that here we've got a mistake with the legend, where the legend here, the blue should be 2000 and the red should be 2010? It's likely a mistake. It's not for sure a mistake, but it's likely a mistake. It's because if it's not, it would be kind of contradictory to the yeah, that's right, Andrew. So it's also given in the order of the data, but it would also be kind of contradictory to the smartphone ownership levels. So it's kind of strange that, you know, less people own smartphones overall in 2010, but according to this graph, smartphone ownership increases, right? Yeah, Rejveer, exactly, from the first graph. So we kind of noticed that. So let's make that correction. Let's adjust. Now, if this happens in the IELTS exam, what should you do? Okay. If you had something like this happen in the IELTS exam, where you had the blue depicting 2010 and the red depicting 2000, what should you do? Just kind of a fun question. Sarah says, just go with it as is. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. Ask the invigilator. Inform the supervisor, right? Absolutely. So if you notice that there's a very clear or seemingly obvious mistake in the data, you should inform the invigilator. You should inform them and you should say, hey, I think there's a mistake with this graph. Can you please just check with some other people and let me know what you want me to do? And if the invigilator says, well, just write it as you see it, then write it as you see it, but let them know. Let them know that you've observed that. And you might even follow up with an email after the exam with the IELTS Center and say, I think I noticed a significant mistake in your graphs. It's unlikely to happen, very unlikely to happen, but the world is not a perfect place. So ask the invigilator. Absolutely. Okay. All right. So for our purpose, let's just swap these around. Okay. So we're going to switcheroo these two different ones, and then we'll go from there. All right. Okay. Here we go, everyone. The second graph. Okay. Now we want to connect these, so definitely use connective words, especially since these two graphs are connected. Okay. So in addition, the second graph further details a noticeable increase of smartphone ownership based on further education, as well as more phones used in 2010 than 2000 overall. Okay, so that is what we can see here. So in the second year, we can see that within each education level, there's definitely consistently more phone use overall. Now the differences are greater when somebody doesn't have a university degree versus university degree. Okay? All right, students, don't get lost here. Don't get disinterested. So keep writing, okay? Keep analyzing. Here is my overview. I'm going to read the full overview here. All right? Here we go. Always check your paragraphs after you've finished writing them. Immediately in the first graph, smartphone use consistently increased with every 2-year interval and more than doubled in the given decade. In addition, the second graph further details a noticeable increase of smartphone ownership based on further education, as well as more phones used in 2010 than 2000 overall. Let's put a comma here. It'll make it a bit more accurate punctuation-wise. For task 1, comma use, understanding comma use is very important. It's also important for task 2, but in task 1, you're likely going to use even more commas. Expository essays use a lot of commas usually because you have a lot of definitions and interpretations. Okay? Andrew writes, at first glance, it is clear that smartphones gained popularity. You don't need to use word gaining, just gained. Gained popularity biannually in the given 10 years. Furthermore, the percentage of people who possess these devices increased with each consecutive educational level, both at the beginning and end of the decade. Okay, good. Andrew, that's some nice writing. All right. Keep writing, students. Keep writing. Now comes the analysis. Or analyses in this case, for plural, because we're analyzing both graphs and we're looking at multiple analysis. So report from the most important to the least important. And identify 6 to 8 points to clarify following the logic of your overview. Okay, so here the logic of my overview is I'm talking about the significant increase in graph 1 with that doubling. Now I'm looking at the percentages. And then after that, I will write about the second body paragraph. That can all be written in one body paragraph, or sorry, the second graph. You don't need 2 body paragraphs here. You can just do it as one, okay? Especially in this case where the information is quite strongly linked. Rakwea writes, in addition, the second graph further details a noticeable increase of smartphone ownership based on further education, as well as more phones used in 2010 than 2000 overall. All right, Silviana, let's have a look at what you wrote here. I don't think I digressed with your writing in the previous part, so let's take yours for the overview. Here we go. All right. So Silviana writes, as shown on the first graph. Yeah, okay, Silviana, I mean, with the introduction, we already used the word depicted or shown, so you don't need to continue with that in the overview. You can just say in the first graph. Okay, so be concise. In the first graph, there is a very consistent increase of smartphone usage every 2 years. Silviana, be concise. Usage every 2 years from 40 to 80% in this decade. From 40 to over or just over 80%. So be accurate, okay? Moreover, the second graph illustrates more detail. We don't need the more detail. Yeah, okay, I get what you're saying. More of the second graph illustrates more. It's this kind of writing we want to avoid because the sound of it is awkward. So Silviana, see how you have more and then more? It's awkward to read. Like moreover, the second graph illustrates more detail. So more of the second graph illustrates greater detail. Let's say that. Okay, greater detailed data of the ownership based on education levels. We have that in the introduction. This is just a repeat of the introduction. Greater detailed data showing an increase based on education levels. Based on education levels and higher percentages in 2010 than 2000. Okay, so now it's a bit better. I've improved it from about a band 5 to about a band 7.58. Okay, all right, Sylviana, so concise language and new information. All right, if you're just repeating information, that is a sure way to lose time and lose band scores. So that's another very common mistake in task 1 is students tend to just repeat information. Okay, all right. Okay, everyone, so let's take a look at those data points. All right. So first one, 40%. Let me go a little bit smaller there with that. There we go. Okay, so first one, 40%. That's my data point 1. Sure, awesome. Okay, data point 2. Well, let me analyze a little bit here. So we've got 40% here. We've got about 47%, and then maybe like 53%. So here I'm increasing roughly about 7% between these years, okay? Roughly. And then here I go from 51 or 2 to about 61 or 2. And then here, so notice what I'm doing here, right? It's slight, it's subtle, but there is something noticeable here. So we've got 7% increases here, and here we've got closer to 10% increases. Does everybody see that? Okay. So it seems like between these 2 years, this is a critical point. So between 2004 to 2006, there seems to be a slight increase in the percent ownership of cell phones. All right. So in the first 3 years, there's a difference of 7%, and in the last 3 years, there seems to be a difference of 10%. So that would be my second, and then this would be my third point. Okay. Again, critical analysis, right? Critical thinking, interpret. The more you can catch this kind of information, the better you can interpret. And the better sentences you'll have, okay? So it's fairly consistent. It's definitely significant. And there is a greater increase following 2004 with cell phone ownership, okay? All right, which makes sense because this first one is 40%, this one is 85%, so that additional 45% basically comes from the 7-7 and the 10-10-10, right? So this would be 14, and then this would be the additional 30, right? It's not a sharp increase, Domenico. That wouldn't be accurate, okay? It's not a slight and sharp because the difference between 7 to 10% is not a lot. It's just a slight, okay? Okay, so we'll report that in a second, but let's take a look at the second graph here. Romelia says it's steady. Yes, it's definitely steady, or it's a stable increase with a slight jump somewhere around or somewhere between 2004 and 2006, right? All right, so here, educational levels. Okay, we've got some interesting data here. So here in no high school certificate, we've got the biggest difference or gap between the years, and it's clearly the least of all of these, okay? So it's interesting for a couple of reasons. So that would be my point 4. And then my point 5 would be the difference between no high school, and university. Okay, this is where we notice the greatest difference in cell phone usage is between no high school versus those who have an undergraduate degree or higher. Okay, now the differences here, there's also clear increases, but they're less than what we have at these lower education levels, right? So this would be my 4. This would be my 5. Or you know what? If I want to be a bit more logical, I would make this my 4. This comparison here. And then this 5. And then this 6. Okay, so that's the logic I'm going to follow. Planning your essay, so having a clear idea of what you're going to write, is very important before you write. And we're spending a lot of time here discussing this, but of course in the real IELTS exam, in that 20 minutes, you have to get to this point of your essay within the first few minutes. Okay? All right. Yeah, Romelia is saying, I've never tackled this sort of task. I used to prepare for Cambridge C1 and they don't require this kind of writing. Yeah, as I mentioned, Romelia, the reason why IELTS requires it is because they need people to show expository writing for college, university, and for work. Expository writing is a very common form of writing for college, university, and work. So that's why IELTS decided to do it this way. And it makes a lot of sense. That's why IELTS is so popular for these goals, these purposes. Okay, so let's go back to graph 1. And then, of course, we have to connect between the two graphs, right? So let's go back to graph 1, and then let's talk about the first points, okay? So point 1, point 2, and then point 3, okay? All right, here we go. So here's where we report a bit on the percents, okay? So we're interpreting and we're reporting, but again, interpretation is more important than reporting, okay? All right. So here we go. In more detail. In greater detail. Now again, right students, I'd like to see your writing and then I'll help you with some feedback when I see it, okay? All right. All right, for some reason my word processor decided to slow down a little bit, which is okay. It'll give you more time to catch up. So in greater detail, less than half of the population had phones in 2000, or instead of 2000, I keep saying 2000, at the turn of the millennium. That's always kind of interesting, right? Because it's the changing of 1,000 years. So millennium means 1,000 years at the turn of the millennium. So in greater detail, less than half of the population had phones at the turn of the millennium. And then you can do this if you really want to report the percent at 40%. This increased by roughly 7% every 2 years until 2004, at which time the rate of increase jumped to approximately 10% for the following 6 years, ending at about 85% phone ownership. Okay, So, and I don't need to say doubled here because I already said doubled in the overview. So I don't want to repeat information. Again, I'm just giving more information. You should never be repeating information, students, either in your writing or in your speaking. Okay. All right. Andrew says, in greater detail, in the year 2000, just 4 people out of 10 used a smartphone. Had a smartphone. We don't know how many used a smartphone, Andrew. Had is a bit more accurate there. This figure rose about 7%. And it's true, Andrew, because, for example, like a lot of couples, husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, they shared their cell phones, right? Back in the day. But I get it, Andrew, because it's saying cell phone usage. So do you use a cell phone isn't the same as do you own a cell phone. So arguable, Andrew, arguable. I get it. And this figure rose by about 7% every 2 years for the next 4 years, surpassing 50% in 2004. Okay. The following period saw the continuation of this upward trend, with each ratio being roughly 10% higher than the previous. Very nice, Andrew. Nice writing. It's different from mine, but also very good. Okay. All right. Raquea writes, in greater detail, less than half of the population had phones at the turn of the millennium. Okay. At 40%, this increased by roughly 7% every 2 years until 2004, at which time the rate of increase jumped. So you are copying what I'm writing, and that's good practice too, Raquea. That's good practice too. Okay. All right. So that's 1, 2, 3. Not a lot there. All right. We've got some more detailed data here. So here we go. Looking at the data. At a more granular level. Okay, so that's here. Significantly less people used smartphones with education levels with high school or lower. Now, notice how, as I'm writing and as I'm thinking, I sometimes move around. Like right now, I just jumped from education levels back to with high school or lower education levels. Personally, this is why I prefer the computer-based practice exams. Just kind of my style of thinking and writing. I tend to move around in my writing. So if you can touch type like me, I highly recommend the computer-based exam as opposed to the paper-based exam. The paper-based exam, you have to be a little bit more careful with your sentence composition and your thinking because it can get really messy otherwise if you're like me and you're adding words and taking words out. So think about that, okay, before you sit your IELTS exam, all right? So at a more granular level, significantly less. So looking at the data at a more granular level, and you know what? Again, this is wordy, so I can even do this. So at a more granular level, significantly less people use smartphones with high school or lower education levels than those with a university degree. Okay, whether that's bachelor's or not, all right? And we can look at the data here, right? So notice the data difference. Here is the high school levels versus the university degree. Let me get that a little bit thicker so you can see what I'm doing a bit more clearly. Like that, right? So you can see this here, okay? So this is 2010, as I mentioned, don't worry about those, okay? So this is 2010 and this is 2000. So we're looking at the difference here, okay? And the difference is anywhere from this low bar up to the high bar, right? So the difference is anywhere from that's 15% all the way to 60%. So 60 minus 15, and you do have to do some simple math, is about 40 to 45%. So anywhere from, let's say, 35 to 45% less usage in each of these two time periods. Okay? University versus no university education. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm looking at the difference here. Let me draw it differently. So I'm looking at the difference of this versus, sorry, I should do it like this. So I'm looking at the difference of this versus this. Okay, so that range difference. All right, hope that makes sense. Okay, which is about, you can, so IELTS, it's not university. In university, if I'm your professor, I would expect that you say 35, 45%, but on IELTS, you could easily just say 30 to 40%. Okay, so it doesn't have to be super accurate. It just has to be approximate. All right. So at a more granular level, significantly less people use smartphones with high school or lower education level than those with a university degree, ranging from roughly 30 to 40% in both 2000 and 2010. Okay. And then we can get into the least and the most. Okay. So this is an interesting data point. We're reporting interesting data points. So this is an interesting one. The least was no high school certificate, but you can still see that even with no high school certificate, there was an incredible increase, almost a tripling from, it is a tripling, from 15% to 45% between the 2 years. Again, don't worry about these here, they're reversed, okay? So from 2000 to 2010, here it's triple, okay? And again, you want to notice these very, very quickly, all right? In the next one, it's a double, okay? In these ones, it's nowhere near as drastic, okay? You've got about a 20% and then even less, but I'm not going to report on this in that much detail because it's not as impressive as these two. So these are the two that I want to report on, and then just the comparison of those, okay? All right, I'm deviating a little bit from what I outlined as my points, but that's okay. You can do that as long as you've got good structure and as long as you know what you're doing, okay? All right, Andrew says touch typing allows you to finish typing your ideas before you're done thinking about them. Yes, Andrew, the other benefit of touch typing is that you can see and think at the same time. You're not concentrating on what your fingers are doing, but you're actually concentrating on the content. So touch typing is very, very important because you're focused on the content rather than what your fingers are doing, right? Okay, so notably, phone use tripled among those without a high school diploma, from 15 to 45% in the decade. As well, it doubled for those with a high school diploma. And I'm not going to write more percents. I could write doubled from 30 to 60, but I don't need that much granularity or detail. However, the increase was not as significant for those with an undergraduate degree or higher. Okay. And what's that difference? It's about 20%. Okay. So, however, the increase was not as significant for those with an undergraduate degree or higher. It was between 15 to 20% increase. Or change. Okay. All right. Undergraduate. There we go. All right. So I've highlighted that difference. Okay. All right. Now, if I really want to digress into a bit more information, I could say that the highest or the most phone usage was for those with a doctorate degree at 75% in 2000 and 90% in 2010. So we could do that if I've got a bit more time, right? So the highest ratio of smartphone use was for those, or simplify, was doctorate level education with 75% in 2000 and 90% in 2010. Okay. And then that's it. Okay. So that's all I'm going to do there. Now, before I finish, and we used to tell students to write a summary, but yes, IELTS is like, you don't need a summary, but it's good to summarize the information. So you can add it like this. In summary, with each consecutive year, as well as further education, cell phone usage increases. All right, that's it. That summarizes both of those graphs. All right, and now I just read it to check it. So I read the paragraph, and at home I read the essay as well. So analysis, in greater detail, less than half of the population had phones at the turn of the millennium at 40%. This increased by roughly 7%. I might use a semicolon here. So a half, instead of a quarter stop, use a half stop. So this increased roughly 7% every 2 years until 2004, at which time the rate of increase jumped to approximately 10% for the following 6 years, ending at about 85% phone ownership in 2010. At a more granular level, significantly less people used smartphones with high school or lower education levels than those with a university degree, ranging from roughly 30 to 40% difference in both 2000 and 2010. Notably, phone use tripled among those without a high school diploma from 15 to 45% in the decade. As well, it doubled for those with a high school diploma. However, the increase was not as significant for those with an undergraduate degree or higher. It was between 15 to 20% change. The highest ratio of smartphone use was at the doctorate level education, with 75% in 2000 and 90% in 2010. In summary, with each consecutive year, as well as this, I have, if I want to be super accurate and go for that real band 9, I'm going to use what Andrew used here. And consecutive biennium, I think. Biennium is the correct word here. With each consecutive biennium, as well as further education, cell phone usage increases overall. So let me read that sentence again. In summary, with each consecutive biennium, as well as further education, cell phone usage increases. Yes, that looks good now. Okay. All right. So that is the analysis. And as far as the word count goes, with the introduction, overview, analysis, I've got about 260 words. Okay. That's without the instructions. Okay. So let me see. I can do an exact count here. Let's do it like that. 280. Okay. So I've got 280, which is a little bit on the long side. So you notice it's easy to, especially when you got two graphs, it's easy to get way up there. So some of you are like, whoa, that's like more, almost double what they're asking. They're asking for 150. So you have to be comfortable writing this in 20 minutes. If you're not, then you should shorten it. You should take out some information that might not be as necessary. So you might take out the summary. You might say, hey, I'm not going to put that in. That's too much writing. You might take out some of the details here, a couple of the points that you feel might, already be discussed in the overview, right? So you can decrease it. Just do keep in mind that Band 9 essays, Band 8 and 9 essays tend to be around 220 to 240 words even. Okay. Remember, the instructions say at least 150. It doesn't mean you need to write 150. It means you have to write at least 150, right? Okay, Domenico says, I usually write 230. Yeah, 230 is a good range, Domenico. Absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of designed for that. Okay. All right, everybody. So that's the essay. And again, so on the websites, when you have access to the premium package, and I know many of you do, so many of you who are premium or who are members of the YouTube channel, you also have premium membership to the websites. You've clicked on those red buttons. And then in your My Student account, when you're there, click on the full online academic IELTS course, okay? I'm sometimes a little bit sad by how infrequently certain people actually use the course. They really want to just see the videos and such, but we've got these great courses and we worked so hard to make them for you. So check them out. So you have the writing section here, okay, in your premium course, and when you click on that, you will see the different parts here, and you can kind of go through each of the topics here, and then you get to, for instance, writing task 1. Let's see, can you see that well beside me? Yeah, absolutely. There you go, writing task 1 and 2. And you see the different types of graphs and charts. So let me get that annotation out of the way. So you see here like bar graphs, line graphs, pie charts, and then you've got the examples of them. And then we go through the usage of each one, as I mentioned. So it tells you here, for example, that bar graphs are used to show comparisons and contrasts between nominal data like countries and interval scales. In this case, it wasn't countries, it was education level, right? And then you keep going through. So you look at the reason for line graphs, you get some useful vocabulary given to you here as well, okay? So if you've got access to our premium IELTS course on either the academic or the general IELTS, make sure to go through those parts and use it. Okay, I'm hoping that you do. All right. Okay, everybody. So that's it for this class. Again, for these IELTS lessons on the website. Check us out at aehelp.com for academic IELTS, gltshelp.com for general. I'll be back in about 30 minutes, a little bit more, 35 minutes, to help you with the listening section. We're going to do some listening practice for part 1, part 2 together. Okay, until then, maybe check out the website, aehelp.com, gltshelp.com that I just showed you. And if you like it, sign up for it. It's a one-time payment. It's lifetime access. Really doesn't cost a lot of money, so you're good. Okay, everyone, I'll be back. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Carolina, for being here with me. Thank you, members, for your support. And I hope to see you in the upcoming class dealing with listening section. Bye for now.